Caleb Grayson, a prominent Manhattan businessman, was on a personal mission. His steps echoed with determination as he walked through the tree-lined pathways of the cemetery in Ohio. Autumn tinted the leaves with golden and reddish hues, creating a warm blanket that spread across the ground. Despite being surrounded by so much beauty, Caleb's heart felt heavy. He was there to pay tribute to his father, with whom he hadn't been able to bid a proper farewell. Arriving at his father's grave, he knelt down slowly, his eyes welling up. "Father," he began with a quivering voice, "I'm sorry. I should have been here. Europe, the business, none of it should have kept me away." The words faded into whispers as emotions overwhelmed him. Lost in his world of remorse and longing, a thin and tremulous voice caught his attention. "Sir, could you spare some change?" Surprised, Caleb lifted his gaze to find Theo, a young boy with big eyes and tangled brown hair, wearing faded and worn-out clothes. His face held a mixture of hope and desperation. "Why are you begging in a cemetery?" Caleb asked, his expression shifting from pain to concern. Theo hesitated for a moment, biting his lower lip, then let out, "My grandmother says we have to do whatever it takes to survive. She brings me here because people are more likely to give when they're sad." Caleb looked at him, deeply touched. "Shouldn't you be in school, playing with other kids your age, instead of begging?" He shrugged, looking at the ground. "Grandma says every penny counts, and I have to help at home." Caleb's heart tightened as he realized the reality this young boy was facing. Even in the midst of his own pain, he felt a sudden urge to do something for Theo, and perhaps find some redemption in the process. The revelation of the boy's name, Theo, made Caleb's heart nearly stop for a moment. It was the same name as his late father's, and that coincidence, or perhaps fate, amplified the compassion that was already growing within him. He looked into Theo's eyes, noticing a familiar spark that resembled the determined yet gentle gaze of his father. Theo caught Caleb's intense gaze and asked timidly, "Sir, did I say something wrong?" Caleb sighed and replied, "No, kid. Your name is the same as my father's, whom I was visiting today." Theo's eyes widened in surprise. "Really? I was named after my grandfather, but I've never seen him." The connection felt even deeper now. "Theo," Caleb said with determination, "would you like to come with me? Let's buy some things for you." The boy's eyes lit up with hope. "Really, sir?" Caleb nodded affirmatively. "Yes, really. First, we'll go to a clothing store to get you something more comfortable to wear, and then we'll make a stop at the supermarket." Incredulous yet excited, Theo grabbed Caleb's outstretched hand. "Thank you, sir. No one has ever done something like this for me." As they walked together, Caleb felt that it wasn't just a coincidence that he and Theo had crossed paths that day. Perhaps it was a sign from his father, guiding him to do something good and meaningful amidst his pain. Caleb's car pulled up in front of an old wooden house, its peeling paint and dusty windows giving an impression of abandonment. The steps creaked beneath his feet as he and Theo walked up to the door before ringing the doorbell. Theo hesitated. She might be, well, you know, drunk. Caleb nodded understanding, and shortly after, the door opened slowly. An elderly woman with gray hair and deep bags under her eyes appeared. She was wearing a faded robe and held a nearly empty bottle of whiskey. "What do you want?" she grumbled, barely looking at Theo. "Grandma brought a friend," Theo said, trying to sound optimistic. She raised an eyebrow, and for the first time, her eyes met Caleb's. "And who are you?" Caleb extended his hand in greeting. "My name is Caleb. I met Theo at the cemetery, and..." Another taking pity. "Well, we've had plenty like you," she interrupted him. Sensing the tension, Caleb tried to ease the situation. "I just wanted to help, and I got interested in Theo's story." Nicolette sarcastically laughed. "Story? You don't know half of it." As Theo looked at the ground, clearly uncomfortable, Nicolette continued. "Let me tell you something, young man. This boy is not my grandson. I used to be his nanny. His mother left him with me, promising to come back from a trip, and she never showed up again. Caleb's heart squeezed upon hearing this. He looked at Theo, whose eyes were filled with tears. "The only reason I still keep him here," Nicolette added bitterly, "is because he makes some money begging. It helps pay the rent and buy more drinks." Theo murmured, "I just wish Mom would come back." Caleb stepped forward. "Theo, you deserve something better than this, and I'll do what I can to help you." He gave Nicolette a reproachful look, but his compassion for the boy shone through the most. Caleb looked around the small room, taking in every detail of the desolate environment that lay before him. The tense air was interrupted only by the soft dripping of a faulty faucet and a faint rustling of torn curtains. The desperation that seeped through the walls and worn wooden floor was almost palpable. He then turned to Nicolette, his eyes meeting hers. She looked tired, her gaze carrying the weight of many years of struggles and disappointments, but there was also a spark of defensiveness, as if she were constantly bracing herself for judgment. Caleb took a deep breath, carefully choosing his words. "Nicolette, I can't let Theo live like this. He deserves more. He deserves a chance." She laughed a bitter and broken laugh. "And what do you know about giving someone a chance?" Caleb swallowed hard but kept his tone calm. "I know I can offer him a better life, a place where he doesn't have to beg or live in fear." Nicolette's eyes narrowed suspiciously. "And what do you gain from this?" "Money? I don't have much. I don't want your money. I just want Theo to have a better life. If I can take care of him and ensure his safety, I'd give anything in return." Nicolette hesitated, her eyes scanning Caleb's face for any sign of falsehood. Finally, she sighed resignedly. "He deserves more than I can offer him. If you can truly give him a future, then do it. But remember, if you break your promise, there'll be no place on earth where you can hide from me." Finally, after seeing her as an insensitive woman, he felt a little humanity in the lady. Caleb nodded solemnly, feeling the weight of the responsibility he had just taken on. He still had no idea how he would face the legal and bureaucratic challenges that would surely arise, but he was determined to do whatever it took for Theo. Caleb drove home, his thoughts swirling in his mind. Bringing Theo into his life wouldn't just be a legal challenge, but a personal one as well. In the driver's seat of his car, his hands were trembling, and his heart was pounding as the next battle was revealing everything to Regina, his wife. Yes, Caleb had been married for a year to an extremely vain and possessive woman. The house, a huge Victorian mansion on the outskirts of Manhattan, reflected Regina's wealth and extravagant taste. She loved throwing lavish parties and showing off to her social circles. Upon entering, he found Regina in front of a mirror, adjusting an expensive pearl necklace. She looked up at him, her expression indifferent. "You're late." "I had to cancel our reservations," Caleb sighed. "Regina, we need to talk." She rolled her eyes. "What now?" "I met a boy today, Theo. He needs a home, a family." Regina laughed a sarcastic laugh. "So what? There are hundreds of kids out there." Caleb took a deep breath, trying to control his emotion. "I want to adopt him. He reminds me of myself when I was young, and he needs help." Regina raised an eyebrow. "You can't be serious. I've made it clear from the start that children aren't part of my life plan. Regina, I've always dreamed of being a father. I thought over time you might change your mind, but now this child is in front of me, and I can't ignore the call of my heart." Regina put the necklace back in place and turned to Caleb, anger flickering in her eyes. "You always do this, make impulsive decisions without consulting me. Why should I give up my dreams and desires for a child who's not even mine?" Caleb closed his eyes, feeling the pain of her words. "Because it's the right thing to do, because I love this child, and he needs us." Regina snorted. "He might need you, but I don't need a child." The tension between them was palpable, silence filling the room. Caleb felt like the world was crumbling around him. He wondered if the love they had for each other would be enough to bridge the chasm that had formed between them. Upon returning to the bustling New York City, Caleb began shaping a new chapter in his life with Theo at the center. The contrast between the pothole streets and Caleb's mansion was evident, and for Theo, it was like being transported to another world. On the first day, Caleb took Theo to a sophisticated clothing store on Fifth Avenue. Observing the boy gazing in awe at the shiny displays, he said, "Come on, choose whatever you want. You deserve the best." Theo, a bit hesitant and still adjusting to his new reality, timidly responded, "Are you sure, Mr. Caleb? I've never had anything this nice." With a warm smile, Caleb replied, "It's a new life, Theo, and I promise to do the best I can for you." The following weeks were filled with new experiences for Theo: music lessons, park visits, dinners at fancy restaurants, and hours of fun playing video games together. Every time Caleb looked at Theo, he saw not just a boy he had taken in, but a representation of the family dream he had always yearned for. However, this newfound closeness with Theo only deepened the rift between Caleb and Regina. The joyful sound of Theo's laughter contrasted with the tense silences, with Regina becoming a norm in the household. One day, after a particularly silent dinner, Regina finally broke the silence with a cold, cutting tone. "I can't do this anymore, Caleb. This isn't the life I chose." Caleb, looking at her deeply, said, "Regina, I understand. This was a sudden change for us, but Theo is an amazing boy, and he deserves love and care." With tears in her eyes, Regina replied, "It's not about the boy, it's about us. I don't want to be a mother. We can't go on like this." The room fell into a deafening silence. It was in that moment that Caleb realized that while he had found the family he had always wanted, he was losing the woman he had once dreamed of sharing this journey with. By the end of that night, Regina expressed her final decision: she wanted a divorce. Caleb and Theo developed an unbreakable bond. Whenever he could, Caleb took Theo to discover the city's brilliance and wonder. Together, they flew kites in Central Park, indulged in cotton candy and waffles from food trucks, and even braved the adrenaline of roller coasters at the local amusement park. In every smile, in every laugh, Caleb saw a glimpse of the family he had always wanted to build. On a golden evening after a stroll, the duo walked quietly along the sidewalk. The last rays of sun painted the streets and buildings with shades of gold. In this setting, a figure caught Caleb's attention, a woman with a slight limp in her left leg, her hair gently swaying in the breeze. Something about her profile was painfully familiar. Caleb, feeling a mix of confusion and recognition, instinctively tightened his grip on Theo's hand and slowed down, trying to get a better view of the woman. Suddenly, the stranger turned around, her eyes widening as they met the sight of the boy next to Caleb. Trying to contain the wave of emotions that clearly engulfed her, she exclaimed with a choked voice, "Theo, how did you end up here and with Caleb?" Caleb, still processing the shock of the situation, responded amidst surprise, "Shailene, is that really you? Oh my God, how do you know Theo?" The three found themselves at a crossroads, not just physically but emotionally, with intense gazes locking, trying to piece together the unexpected encounter. Shailene and Caleb's expressions were laden with the gravity of the situation. Both felt the weight of the suppressed past now clamoring for answers. Theo, sensing the palpable tension between them, shifted his restless gaze between the two, trying to decipher the expressions of concern and surprise. Opting for a calmer environment to clarify the whirlwind of emotions and revelations, they decided to settle into a cozy cafe just a few steps away. The establishment had a vintage decor with wooden furniture and hanging lights, creating an inviting atmosphere. Sitting at the table, Caleb delicately ordered coffee along with a fresh muffin for Shailene, perhaps wanting to somehow soften the impact of the encounter. For Theo, he ordered a generous scoop of vanilla ice cream, attempting to distract him even briefly from the seriousness of the moment. After a brief silence, Caleb, with intense and anxious eyes, turned his gaze to Shailene. "We need to understand what happened, Shailene," he murmured, almost as if fearing the answer. Shailene closed her eyes for a moment, gathering strength to recount her painful journey. With a deep sigh, she began, "When we separated, I found out that I was expecting Theo. I was lost, Caleb. My parents, with their destructive choices, wanted no part in our child. Even in the midst of fear, I knew I couldn't give him up. Nicolette seemed to be the only option at that time. She offered to take care of him while I pursued a more stable life in New York. Shailene's words flowed, each laden with sadness and determination. The days were long and challenging. While sewing and cleaning, I dreamed of a better life for us until one night, coming home from work, a car hit me, altering the course of everything. Tears welled up in her eyes, but she continued, as much as the recovery was grueling and my leg never returned to normal, the love for our child kept me standing. Nicolette was my only connection to him, but recently, when she mentioned a man who had taken Theo, my world crumbled. And now we're here, facing a twist of fate that not even in my wildest dreams could I imagine. With the revelation, Caleb's heart threatened to leap out of his chest. His once bright eyes, filled with the enthusiasm of recently discovered parenthood, were now clouded by the storm of emotions. His face, previously bronzed by the New York sun, now appeared ashen white as he tried to grasp the magnitude of the information. He swallowed hard, attempting to gather the voice that seemed to have been stolen by shock. "You mean that," he began hesitantly, "Theo, this wonderful boy I've been loving and caring for, is really our child, our own flesh and blood?" Shailene, with teary eyes and an expression that mixed sadness and hope, merely nodded. "Yes, Caleb. Theo is our boy, the fruit of the love we shared, however brief it may have been." The sudden clatter of Theo's spoon falling on the wooden floor echoed through the cafe. The boy, wide-eyed and flushed, looked alternately at Caleb and Shailene, trying to grasp the complexities of the situation. In his childlike mind, he had only vague memories of a smiling woman who occasionally appeared in his dreams, stroking his hair and whispering words of love, and now that woman sat before him, connected to him by bonds that went beyond imagination. Is he really my dad?" Theo asked, his voice small and uncertain, yet full of hope and palpable curiosity. As they left the cozy ambience of the cafe, the trio walked in perfect harmony despite the recent strangeness of the revelations. The evening sun cast a golden glow over New York's buildings, creating a color palette that seemed hand-painted. Shailene, still slightly limping, was to Caleb's left, her arm entwined with his, seeking support. On the other side, Theo held Caleb's right hand, his fingers gripping tightly as if afraid this new reality might evaporate at any moment. Passers-by cast curious glances at them, some with genuine smiles enchanted by the sight of that family radiating contagious happiness. Hushed comments about what a beautiful family and look at their joy could be heard as they walked. Caleb, his heart brimming with gratitude and determination, pulled out his phone and quickly searched for the city's best orthopedic clinic. With a brief phone call, he secured an appointment with renowned surgeon Dr. Lawrence for Shailene. "We'll take care of this, Shailene. I'll do whatever's in my power to make sure you're okay," he said firmly, looking deeply into her eyes. Shailene, her eyes moist, merely nodded, too overwhelmed to speak. Suddenly, euphoria seized Caleb, and he stooped, lifting Theo by the waist and hoisting him in the air, mimicking airplane maneuvers. Theo's contagious joy was palpable as laughter bubbled from his lips. The scene was a depiction of love and happiness itself, and as Caleb spun his son in the air, he felt a deep peace and an unwavering certainty that somehow, mysteriously, everything was falling into its rightful place, guided by a divine hand. Thank you for joining us today on Deep Stories. Be sure to like and subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on our next video.